Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to our next episode of Rules of Engagement. This is going to be called Forming Foundations, or excuse me, Developing Foundations, and this is going to be a really exciting episode brought to you by MLG, presented by myself, your host today, Nick Axelav Ranish. And this episode is going to be really featured on beginning players and how to kind of develop into the game. We'll get a little bit more into this episode in a second, but first let's walk through what the overall show is about. It's going to be a daily show, Monday through Thursday, every day at 5 p.m. Eastern. Monday, of course, we had Talking Tactics. If you missed that yesterday, be sure to catch a video at MLG.tv. I think it was a great episode, went through a lot of high-level tactics, how to contain your opponent, how to deal with timings, things of that nature. Today, we're on developing fundamentals. Of course, I'll get a little more into today's show in a bit, but let's talk about what we have Wednesday, Mechanics of the Bazaar. This is going to be a really fun show looking at pro-level games where they do some little bit crazy strategies. And, we're going to be kind of looking at those and saying, did they do these crazy strategies because they're tired and want to just mix it up? Or did they do it because it has a high chance to win? Why isn't this strategy used all the time? And why was it good to be applied in this specific professional game? Thursday, we're going to do community critique, and this is where you guys back at home, if you want your replay analyzed and the tactics kind of looked over, send that to me at www.majorleaguegaming.com/replays. We'll throw up a couple of those and kind of analyze them and maybe make fun of the community a bit, but mostly going to be focusing on improving your play back at home. All these shows start at 5 Eastern, and very importantly, every show, the last section of the show is going to be question and answer period. During the show, send any questions you have to me on Twitter at ISAxLav. We'll save the last few minutes to answer some of you guys' questions. If there's anything I kind of glossed over a bit and you're like, hey, wait a minute, you left me behind. It's kind of like professor's office hours, but immediately after the lecture. So we'll get to that pretty soon. Today, though, we have Developing Foundations. It's going to be a 3-segment show. First segment is going to be on economy basics. This is going to be, understanding basically how to start an economy basically from scratch. There's a lot of people, you play the campaign, you maybe watch the game, but you jump into multiplayer. You start with like a Nexus and 6 workers, or a command center and 6 SCVs, something of this nature, and you have no idea how to even start building your base. So we're going to look at how that kind of works, the very basics of economic development. Then we're going to move on to micro concepts. This is something you watch, the pros play. You hear the commentators and you're like, wow, amazing micro. You're like, yeah, he won. But what was the micro there? How did he make his units do what I couldn't do? Because when I played, all my guys ended up dead in a few minutes. So that's what we're going to look at, the fundamental concepts of how to maximize your unit efficiency and how to apply those into your game, whether it's just with a single zealot or with 10 zealots, etc. Then we're going to build order concepts. And this is another thing I think a lot of people just getting into the game struggle with is, okay, you get some workers going, then you build your barracks, and then what do you build, right? There's a lot of different routes to go from there, and I'm not going to tell you what to build, all right? I want you guys to explore the game for yourself. What I will do is I'm going to tell you how to make an informed decision to make your buildings actually make sense to optimize your goal for the game, which of course is to defeat your opponent, but you're going to have sub-goals involved in that. And then of course, at the end of today, question and answer period. Throughout this show, especially this show, I think the question and answer is going to be particularly relevant because I'm going to try to cover a lot of these basics, and I may gloss over some things a little bit that if you've never played at all, you might want more clarification on. And if I do, I apologize. Shoot me the question on Twitter saying, hey, I really thought what you talked about there was cool, but I didn't quite understand this concept. Throw it on Twitter. We'll cover it at the end of this show, and then maybe you can watch the VODs later to watch it in reverse and catch back up on something you may have missed. So without further ado, let's get into the economy basics, starting from scratch. So this is just, a basic replay. There's nothing really too crazy going on here, but we're just going to throw the start button on, and we're going to take a look at how the income changes as you get more workers. And this is something that's important to realize, is how much each worker does for you. This is the gathering resources stage. We're also going to go through production stages later in the show, but for gathering resources, the most important thing to know is how much each worker gives you. So if you see here, the first 16 workers mine at approximately the same rate. What they do is the first ones, 1 through 16, they all mine at a rate of 40 minerals per minute. So I'm just going to write this up here just so you guys know, is first ones 1 through 16 are going to mine at a rate of 40 minerals per minute. So that's your first 16 workers. After that, you're going to lose a little bit of efficiency. Your next workers, 17 through 20, those guys are going to mine at roughly 30 minerals per minute. So pardon my writing here, but so as you get more workers, they lose efficiency. The reason why this is true is because every worker in StarCraft 2, whether it's a probe, an SCV, a drone, what have you, only one worker can mine from a patch at a time. So if you're noticing this in the background, you see here, each worker is mining, another one's running back and forth. So there's 8 mineral patches on pretty much every base in multiplayer StarCraft. The first 16 mine at a pretty consistent rate, and that's because one can be mining while the other one goes and ferries the minerals back to Nexus, and by the time it gets back to the mineral patch, its other buddy is done mining. But when there's only 2 on the patch, if you notice right here, we're going to look at this patch right where I'm pointing to, there's going to be some dead time. Do you see? There's about maybe a couple seconds where there was nobody working on that mineral patch. That's why going from 17 to 20 workers, they still mine money for you, but it's not quite as efficient as the first couple ones were. So then once you get past 20 workers, your next 4 workers, workers numbers 21 all the way to 24, those guys are going to mine at roughly 20 minerals per minute. So you can see as you get more and more workers, each worker you add on starts to mine at a smaller rate, a little bit less efficient of a rate, but it still increases your income. So of course your first 16 workers, each one averages 40 a minute. You can add that up, you're running at 640 minerals per minute. Add another 4, you're going to bump yourself up to 760. Your next 4, you're going to bump yourself up to 840 minerals per minute, and that is the most income you can get off one base, is an average of 840 minerals per minute. So anything past 24, totally useless. They're not going to help you at all, so don't sit there on one base, continually building workers past the 24 mark, no value added there. Now one thing that's important to consider is that this rate of diminishing returns. One thing a lot of people will tell you if you're like a beginning player asking how many workers to get, they'll say stop at 16 workers because anything more than 16 isn't optimal, okay? And that's, I think, a very misguided use of the term optimal, because optimal means the most you can get, right? And I think as we just laid out here, you actually get more income with 24 workers than you do with 16. It's true that each additional worker you get a little bit of diminishing returns, but if all you're worried about is your total income, it's still worth getting the worker, right? I mean, it's like if you're walking behind someone on the street, they're dropping $100 bills, right? And all of a sudden they start dropping $50 bills. Do not pick up the $50 bills because it wasn't quite $100. No, I mean, it's still money, right? You're still going to want to get more workers to get more economy. It's just it will help you a little bit less efficiently, so maybe you have multiple bases. You can switch your workers around a bit to mine faster, but that's a concept we'll talk about in another day, multiple expansions. Right now we're working on one base economy. This is your one base economy on minerals. Now the next step, this is after you've learned how you can mine resources and your total resource mining, is to think about how to spend those resources. So you're going to look at how many production buildings do you want to build off of each of your bases. So what you want to do here is first you want to figure out how much resources can you spend with a single production building. And there's a lot of different production buildings, different ways to do it. I'm going to just say one example really quick, then I'll write down a second example shortly after this. The one example I think is if you're Terran, you're building barracks to get Marines. Each Marine costs 50 minerals. They build in 25 seconds. You're gonna have to do a little bit of math here, but this is part of the game. If you want to try to master the basic economics of the game, you might want to grab a little paper and do a little bit of little bit of arithmetic just so you kind of know what's going on with your economy. 25 seconds, 50 minerals. That means each barracks at constant production is going to spend 120 minerals per minute. If you have 24 workers, you're going to be getting 840 minerals per minute. Actually, I'm just going to write that as your maximum economy. If you're at a full one base, is going to be 840 minerals per minute. So that's your maximum economy. If each barrack spends 120 minerals per minute, this means you want between 6 and 7 barracks on your one base economy, of course. You might want to spend some money on supply depots, SCVs, further expansions. That's all for another story when you're worried about exactly what order to build stuff. But you just want to know, if all you want to do is build Marines, how many barracks should you get? It's not 1, it's not 2. It's going to be between 6 and 7 per base. Okay, now I'm actually going to, that was like a short, quick example. Another example that's going to be slightly more complex. I'm actually going to write out the math for you guys. It's going to be on, let me switch color here. It's going to be on, from a Protoss perspective, on warp gates. All right, so a couple numbers I'm going to give you here is the amount it takes to mine from each warp, or the amount of cost to build a unit from warp gate. Your average warp gate unit, if you average between, I'm not counting High Templar or Dark Templar, just your basic units, Sentries, Zealots, Stalkers, they average at roughly 150 total resources combined. I mean, Zealots are 100 minerals, okay? Stalkers are 125 minerals and 50 gas. Sentries are 50 minerals and 100 gas. So we'll just combine those into one total resource for simplicity, which is the way you should start out doing things. And then you're going to say each one's average, your average warp gate spends 150 resources every time it builds a unit. We're actually just going to pause this replay because it's not going to give us any more use right now. This is where I start dying to a roach. Of course, that's not super super helpful there. So let's pause it right here where you can actually see the total economy. Right now it says 820 for me, but of course that'll bounce up and down a little bit throughout the game. It averages at 840 on a maximum base. Here I have 34 harvesters, but 24 does just as good, I assure you. Back to what I was talking about. So 150 resources per gateway unit on average. Your average warp gate unit takes half a minute to build. That means every warp gate spends 300 resources a minute. All right, so you're going to say 840 resources a minute I get total from mining minerals. You're also going to get 240 resources. Let me write this down real quickly here. 240 resources in gas a minute if you have those gases fully saturated. And if you want to know the saturation point for gas, it's 3 workers per gas geyser to saturate those gases. That'll give you additional 240 resources per minute, totaling 1,080 resources. So you want between 3 and 4 gateways, right? Each gateway, you're going to get, let's actually write it over here. I think this is probably a little bit better spot to put this. So you're going to have 1080 income if you combine minerals and gas. Each warp gate is going to cost you 300 resources per minute. So 300. How many warp gates do you want per base? We're going to say you're not using Chrono Boost and you're spending only on warp gate units. You're going to want between 3 and 4, right? 3 to 4 warp gates. 3 if you don't want to spend 100% of your economy on units. 4 if you do want to spend 100 of your economy in units. So I'm going to write warp gates here. I'm just going to put warp. Gates is a little bit too long to fit in there. So that's how many warp gates you want if you want to maximize your production for warp gates. So this is basically the economy basics of the game. It's a little bit dry, but I felt we had to start out this way so you understand from just jumping it into a multiplayer game how many production buildings you need. It's between 3 and 4 for warp gates, between 6 and 7 for the Terran barracks per base you have. If you're at full saturation, 24 workers, that's how you basically approach the game, getting your economy running, and then being able to produce units at a high level. So we're going to go to a quick commercial break, then we're going to jump to our next concept. Actually, wait, before we go to the break, let's just review things real quickly. Every worker you get start getting diminishing returns. First 16, 40 a minute. After that, they start mining at a slightly less rate until you get to 24, in which case they forget to mine at all, and you basically lose all that extra mining income. So stop at 24 per base. You get 1,080 total resources per minute on a fully saturated base, and then you need 3 to 4 warp gates to power that. You need 6 to 7 barracks, or of course 1 hatchery with a queen producing most of their units will be the same. If you want to figure out, how much you need for building marauders, you know how to do the math, right? Just put into cost of marauders, the production time, minerals per minute, gas per minute. Takes a little bit of math, but this is how you're going to basically jump into a game and know what you need to build per base. So we're going to go to a quick commercial break. Then we're going to go on to a section called micro concepts, where now that you know what you need to, how you can build your stuff, we're going to teach you how to use it more effectively.